an interview by the Floral City Heritage Council on March the 18th, 2014. The interviewer is Phyllis Peters, and the interviewees are Laytha C. Danley and Robert L. Collins, brother and sister.
Okay. Would you all just tell me, as we discussed, kind of where you were born in Citrus County and when, and then tell us about your grandparents, great-grandparents, and your lives here. And you can start if you would like.
Okay, I'm Laytha Danley, and I was born in Citrus County in a community called Russell Hill that was a predominantly black community. There were a lot of black families. There were a lot of property owners there at that point in time. And I was born July 15th, 1932. And at that point in time, my parents, lived in this community. And so this is where I began. So I started elementary school there at the age of about 5 or 6. And that had to have been 1930s, 36 or 7 or somewhere in there like that. And we walked to school. And if you can imagine a 5 or 6-year-old kid walking, a few miles to school, but that's what I did. And I did that from the time I began school until I had completed 6th grade in a one-room schoolhouse with one teacher.
Wow.
And so I completed 6th grade, and by the time I completed 6th grade, the county closed the school, and we had to attend school in Floral City. Well, never mind, they didn't provide us any means of getting from the Russell Hill community to Floral City. And in spite of that, now the school bus came to my area every day and picked up the white children and brought them into Inverness and Floral City. So my dad had to transport us to school. And the county did consent to give him, I remember very well, $32 a month for gasoline for driving us back and forth to school. So in the meantime, he took a job in Floral City cutting fruit at Ferris Grove and would bring us early in the morning, and we would stay at a friend's house until time to go to school, and he would go on to the Grove and work all day. And we would be in school all day, and at the end of the day, we would come back to this family's house and stay until he quit work. And then, he would pick us up and take us home. Well, this happened with me in 6th grade, in 7th grade, and 8th grade. And of course, 8th grade was as far as the school in Floral City went at the time. And of course, if you were black, you had to find your own way or else just not go to school at all. So my parents sent me to school in Ocala for the 9th grade. And I was in boarding school, but that became expensive for them. So after 1 year, they sent me to St. Petersburg, Florida, to live with an aunt. And I was there during the school term, and I would come back home on the bus on holidays and back for the summers. So I did that from 10th grade through 12th grade. Then after I finished high school at Gibbs High School, I went to Florida A&M in Tallahassee, and I was there for 4 years. And after I finished Florida A&M, I came back to St. Petersburg and taught school there for a couple of years. Then I got married, and I moved from St. Petersburg to Nashville, Tennessee, where my husband was going to be attending medical school. So we were there for the 4-year period, you know, that he was in medical school. And after that, we went to Boston for a year where he did his internship. And after the internship for a year there, we went to Detroit for him to do a general practice residency. And in the meantime, he was in the U.S. Public Health Service. And being in the Public Health Service, you know, they would give you this training, but you had to pay them back for all of, say for instance, if he did a residency that was 2 years, then he would have to give the U.S. Public Health Service an additional 2 years, you know, sort of pay back. So he was in the Public Health Service for quite a little stretch. And we were there from Boston to Detroit, and then to New York, and then back to Detroit again. So that's when he got out of the Public Health Service and went into private practice.
And was this during like the 40s and 50s?
This, by the time, no, this was much later than that, because I finished high school in 50,
50, okay.
and 50, and went to Florida A&M, and I finished Florida A&M in 54, and I came back to St. Petersburg and taught school there for 2 years, so that would have put me through 1956.
Okay, so this was during the 60s.
During the 60s.
Latter 50s, which has been somewhere 57, 58, in the early part, 60, 61, something like that.
And how about you, Robert? Your school time?
All of that time, I was right behind her. I didn't know I was so close behind her, because I was always a little brother. But it's at the same place, Reverend Finley's house down here side the railroad. That's where we stayed and waited. There was 3 of us. We was waiting for school opening. We go from there to the school, and school come back to the house and wait, and Daddy would come up and knock on the door, and we'd get up, walk across the railroad, get in the car, and come home. This went on. It seemed like forever for me, because all the way through 9th grade, from let's see, I must have been 4th grade when I came out here. Must have been 4th grade. That's one thing I don't quite remember, 3rd or 4th grade when I came to Floral City. But anyway, from Floral City, I graduated from Floral City, which was the 8th grade, went to 9th grade, went to M&S school, did go to 9th grade, but that was it. No follow after 9th or something. So by the next year, my dad and his people that he was talking to and the principals had got him to assemble Booker T. Washington High School. So
Tell me a little bit about how that was assembled and what schools were part of that.
well, the schools that were part of it, the first school would be Hernando, the next school would be Holder, and the next school would be south of Dunellen. Because see, south of Dunellen is in Citrus County. The other side is in Marion. And that's 3 schools. And then they had, they took the one from Floral City also, took the building. And they took Christian River and assembled there. So Christian River no longer had, I don't know what that grade went. I imagine it was countywide, 9th grade for blacks. I'm just imagining, but he'll be able to find that in the archives. But it was the same situation for me, that when I got ready to go to 9th grade, I had went to Inverness, and after 9th grade, somewhere between, I wasn't in on the conversation, but I knew it was going on. I could hear little pieces of it here and there, that they were going to challenge the state of Florida to put a black school in Inverness. And at that time, there was no black high school in Inverness. There was a building. They took that building also and moved it out and set it on the campus. And it looks real. It looked attractive the way they had it. And being from a country area, you know, you thought it was kind of okay. At least it was progress, you know. So after 1952, I graduated from M&S. Went to Florida A&M, 52, and a portion of 53. And they were going to force me to go to the Army because I wouldn't go to the ROTC. I didn't like to play games, you know. I'm a serious type of fella. I'm still after all these years, I'm still, and my wife will tell you I'm a serious type of fella. I just don't like games. And to me, the ROTC was playing like military. So the sergeant in charge of the squad that I was in told me that he was going to send me to the Army. And I could expect that very soon, so I joined the Navy. And I kept on going to class, and he mentioned to me again, I said, help yourself, send me to the Army. I'll be glad if you can do that, because I've already joined the Navy. So this is about 53. Anyway, I joined the Navy. Let's see, I served 3 years, 11 months, 28 days, 14 hours, 15 minutes. That was from February 12th, 1955 to February 12th, 1959. I was in the Navy and came back to Jacksonville, Florida. I didn't come down this area. I was up there where he was making a lot of money. Jacksonville was a seaport town.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm enjoying, I had contacts with guys who were in charge of the Maritime Union, etc. And I joined, I bought a card for the Maritime Union because I wanted to sail, because I'd already been in the Navy. I had my sea legs, so I wanted to sail. And they just never would get down to me on the board. And finally, when they did, I was ready to go, so I just gave up on it. So I was working for the Teamsters in Jacksonville, Florida, so I was getting good pay, so I don't really need to go nowhere to look for a job. I'd stay right here. But after that, I always had an urge to go to get a skill. And they were offering veterans skills in Dallas, in electronics. And I accepted that, and that's how I got out the area. That's why I'm in Dallas, and never have liked Dallas. Stayed there, but never have liked it. But believe it or not, you're 50 years, you know, never have liked it.
But you know what, that happens to a lot of people. They stay in an area because they have a job.
Yes.
They don't really like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had friends who worked in the school system and retired after 35 or 40 years and never liked a day of it. But it was steady employment. And I think it is so significant that one is able to work at something that they really like to do, you know, and to be able to make a living at it. I think that's just remarkable when one can do that.
But it's only 5% of us that can do that. 5%, they said in the United States, that really enjoy their work and they make a living at it. It's 5%, so that's quite a few, very few.
Right, yeah. Well, now tell me some more about your parents and their lives and how long your family has been in Citrus County. How many generations?
Well, now both parents were born in Citrus County. My mother was born in Lee Canto, and my dad, as near as I can determine, was born right on the family property that we have today. And I gather that his mother, from what I can gather, because nobody really talked about these things, I gather that his mother was a teenage mother and was not married at the time. So she had the child, who was my father, and just left him with her parents. because I've heard my father say it, when he remembered anything, his granddaddy was bouncing him, up. So he really was raised by my great grandfather, who was his grandfather, and so he was on that property all of his life.
So your great-great-grandfather owned?
My great-great-grandfather apparently homesteaded this after slavery. He was a freed slave, and at that point in time, they gave the slaves 40 acres and a mule, and he had this 40 acres, and over a period of years, which just boggles my mind as to how he could expand this 40 acres into 200 acres.
And this is where in Citrus County?
This is the southern end of Citrus County. If you go out, are you very familiar with the area?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you go out 41 to 480, and out 480, no, that isn't 480.
Yeah, Stagecoach.
Stagecoach is 480. Well, we are just off 480. You go out 480 to Old Jones Road.
Just above them.
And we are just off Old Jones Road.
Okay, so since right after the end of the Civil War, your family has owned that property?
Yes. Yes.
That's wonderful.
I was told that my great-great-grandfather had a financier, and his financier was Raymond Robbins that owned Chennesega Hill. Chennesega Hills were actually once owned by slave owners.
Yes.
So.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
I did not know that.
Oh, I've been searching. And Mr. Robbins took a liking to my great-great-granddad, Gillum Washington, that was his name, Gillum Washington. And he would loan him money. So anything that my great-grandfather wanted to buy, worth anything, Mr. Robbins would loan him money because he had property and he was doing well. And Mr. Robbins told him to sell 40 acres. It was 160 in the beginning. And the reason it was 160 is because my grandfather, great-great-grandfather was called a field nigger. Likewise, my great-great-grandmother, she was a field nigger. So they had two boys, Dennis and William. So they could handle a 2-mule farm. So that's why they got the 160 acres. But during 1925, just before the Depression, Mr. Robbins told my grandfather to sell 40 acres and take that money to live on till after the Depression passed. Said it probably won't last over 4 or 5 years. I don't know how long it lasted, but anyway, that's how he was able to keep the 120, because he had sold the 40 acres, and I don't know who he sold it to or whatever, but my daddy used to remind me about, he used to go in the smokehouse. Everything was kept in the smokehouse. Money, meat, food, that was anything that was important was kept in the smokehouse. So Daddy, when Granddaddy would go in there to check his meat smoking, Daddy would play with the silver dollars that were stacked up, and he remembered they would be stacked up about that high. So, and I'd ask him how many. He said, I don't know, about 4 or 5, but all I ever did was play with them and put them back when we got ready to go. So that's how he was able to keep the property, because he had already sold 40 acres of it. Now that was told to me by Daddy. Daddy kept always, for some reason, always running the history over to
And
me.
you know what, and now that's interesting because I didn't know that. Now that 40 acres, whomever owned it at that point in time, I guess didn't pay the taxes, and it eventually was bought in by the Landrums just for tax.
It's about, what did you say, how many years ago? That's kind of rough to
It was a long, long time ago, because I was maybe like 5 or 6 years old, you know, like, and I'm 81 now, so that was.
You were older, because I remember, I was down there, so I had to be about 5, I think you must have been
5,
about
6,
10.
7, 8, or 9, or 10, I
Yeah.
guess, yeah.
Yes. So, that's how he was able to survive. In fact, my daddy told me one time, my grandfather grew everything except coffee. And he showed me where they grew the rice at, down on the prairie area next to the Withlacoochee Reserve. That fenced it in later, but my grandfather used to grow rice down there. So he said grandfather never bought anything but coffee, and they used sugar cane for their sugar. Because you know, you cook in fact, I watched my daddy make sugar,
Make the
syrup.
syrup
So
from
we had sugar.
sugar.
We were, you know, small time farmers. But Dad made the syrup and the juice, and we take the juice and put it in the vat and cook it. Still got the vat. And once it gets to bubbling like grits, pop, 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 you gotta snatch the fire out, real fast. Because if you don't get the fire out, you'll turn to sugar. So that's why Grandpapa used to do sometimes, make sugar and also make sugar. So I didn't have to buy any sugar.
Interesting.
It is
This is
wonderful.
like hitting the jackpot, because, you know, for Laytha to just happen to have called, you know, because she figured that I'm like, oh, you called at a great time because my brother is here, and he remembers much more than
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember, because we're like from different times almost, you know.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and did you find that, you know, like living on a farm and growing up on a farm, even during the Depression, were there things that were hard to get, or were you even old enough to even remember?
You know what, I can say
She know about, she know.
that at
remember
that
all
point in
that.
time, though we were poor, I never saw myself as being poor, because we were never without food, we were never without clothing, you know. So, and I'm sure the times were very hard for my parents, but that didn't trickle down,
To us.
you know, to the kids.
No, in fact, I recall my daddy saying that he told my great-grandmother would cook more than enough for the family, because there were people walking the railroad that was hungry, and we would always feed them. So, and you know, it wasn't just blacks, it's blacks, whites, it was everybody, women, children, walking, you know, that's the way they transported from one point to another on the railroad. And Grandpapa always wanted enough food to feed, because he didn't want to see people hungry, you know. And he grew his, so we were blessed that he had enough,
Extremely.
that he could share.
You had an amazing family.
Oh yeah, they had a lot of insight. I look back, my wife gets so tired of my stories. But I have to tell her, you know, I don't care. I still have to get rid of it sometimes.
But you know what, now, my daughter, especially my oldest daughter, would just love spending time with him, because she likes to hear things that happened, you know, when we were kids growing up. And every now and then something will come out, and she will say, oh, you never said so-and-so. I'm like, well, I never thought it was significant, you know, or I never thought it was anything that you wanted to hear about, you know. So consequently, I didn't really talk about, you know, what went on, you know, when I was a kid. But I see he's just full of these anecdotes.
Yeah, now tell me something. Were there things, special things you liked to do when you were growing up? What did you play games? Did you get to go to town? Were there things that you liked to do, either like when you weren't in school or when you had summers off? Or?
Well, for me, Daddy's thought was always that boys should be busy. And that's very true. And I don't care who say they shouldn't be. I wouldn't agree with them. I think boys really need something to do worthwhile with their time. So we always had some weeds to pull or some weeds to chop or something. But we still had playtime, you know, and just games we played, family games we played, you know, tag
And softball and hopscotch.
Yeah, hopscotch.
And doll.
Yes.
And we played make-believe.
Make-believe. That was the biggest
Yes,
thing.
make-believe was, you know, like a big deal.
And I forgot to tell you too that I guess one of the main stays was the cows that my two older brothers bought from a German lady named
Jatto.
Jartow, Jartow. She wanted to sell the Jersey cow, milk cow, but she didn't want the Joneses to get it. So,
And of course, you would know about the Jones family. They
Yeah,
were a big
yeah.
family in Citrus County.
Mhm.
And so they were our neighbors.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So my two older brothers, James, Raymond and James, were working for Miss Jartow, and they come up with a plan where they would pay for the cow. And when we got old Gold, was her name, G-O-L-D, when we got Gold, she had a calf. Gold bought 22 calves, 22 consecutive years. And that's how my daddy got in the cow business.
Ah,
And not that he worked and bought cows. It didn't work like that. It was just that Gold put him in the cow business. And he just
By
kept
producing a calf
Every
every
year,
year for like,
every year.
what, 20 years? or
22
years?
22 years. And on top of that, the milk was so rich till Mama would put it in gallon jugs when she milk, and if it sat up there about 10 minutes, over half of it was cream. And she would skim the cream off, and we would make butter. And everybody around the plant knew that Daddy had a Jersey cow, and they wanted to buy Jersey butter. They wanted the butter. And Daddy just was so busy. We had a mold and all that stuff. And there was always, to me, exciting things to do. Now my brother next to me, he probably wasn't quite as enthusiastic about the situation, but he didn't have no other choice. He didn't have any other choice. He had to go sing along with Mitch. But that's how Dad got in the cow business. And actually, one time in the early 80s, Daddy had over 40-something head of cattle from offsprings, multiplying. Mm-hmm. They all came from Gold. That's almost unbelievable.
it is.
22 years in a row. She'd be late sometime, a few weeks, and she would go, when she'd get ready to have a calf, this was open country. You know, your cows ran out in the open before they put out the no fence law. And we'd miss Gold, and we knew what was happening. Now she's having a calf. And a couple of days she'll come home with a calf behind her.
But you know what, that really was interesting, you know, because all the cattle now fenced in. But at that point in time, you know, there were no fences, they just roamed in the woods.
In the woods.
So we would let the cow out roaming in the woods, and she would go off, stay all day. But in the evenings, you know, when it was time to be milked, she would find her way home, I guess, and then stay there until
Yeah.
she goes out the next day.
Yeah, we
But
kept
that was
the calf.
just fascinating.
Now we kept the calf. We kept the calf fast enough till she came in. And when she come in and eating, we let the calf, Mom milk first, and then let the calf go get his. You know. So yeah, sure.
So we had a great childhood, really.
Yes, we did.
That's wonderful.
Now that's the greatest thing about it. How enjoyable it was. I listen to guys now talk on the radio and television about their life in the city, and I said, "Ooh, wow, who would have wanted that?"
Can't even relate to that.
I couldn't even relate to it. And no food. I couldn't relate to that at all.
You know, tell me something, and let me know if this makes you uncomfortable. Growing up in like the South
Mm-hmm.
during segregation,
How uncomfortable it
how
was?
uncomfortable, how difficult, and the changes that you have seen over the years.
You know, that to me, it was segregation, and you accepted segregation as a way of life because that's the way it was. But being a child, it didn't affect me directly. And the only experience that I had, I remember we were in town once, and we were at, this was a drugstore, and I wanted a Coke. And so my mother goes into this drugstore and, to buy this Coke for me.
Bacon's.
And Bacon's drugstore,
Rexall's
absolutely.
drugstore.
And he said to her that we don't serve colored folks. So that was the only personal encounter that I had, as a child in segregation. But I'm sure my parents, encountered segregation. As a matter of fact, my mother was working for a family. This lady was the principal of a school, and my mother was doing housework for her, and she had a daughter, who was my age, and I guess we were finishing high school at the same time, and she sort of expected that when I finished high school, that I was going to come and, do her housework, for her. So when she approached my mother about it, my mother told her that I was going to be going to college, so I would not be available to do her housework. Well, at that point, she decided that if she had money to send me to college, well, she didn't need that job. So she fired her from the job, and hired, somebody else. Now, those are my two personal encounters, with it. But other than that, I was not personally, bothered by it, though it existed, and I just, accepted it, as a way of life, as the way it was.
And we were actually treated differently because our parents were landowners. It was things they might have would have said to us had they not knew who my dad was. Now, they thought my dad was kind of off in the head because Daddy was pretty straightforward. And Daddy's term was, you can follow me home, and I'm like a fox. I'm going to die in my den, but I'm going to take a lot.
And one of the things, I guess, they did different little things to get him away from the property.
Harass him.
Ariel, why don't you move? Why do you want to stay out here? And this type of thing. And when but my daddy persisted, and he stayed. And we were living on the official mail route, at the time. And then when the no fence law came along, and you had to fence in your cattle, you couldn't let them just roam. Then, of course, we had neighbors who were the Joneses' son, who lived on the other side of us, just fenced off the mail route. This was his property, and he could just fence off the mail route. Well, when he fenced off the mail route, well, that only affected just two black families. That was my family and the Mayo family, which was another family that owned property.
Our first cousins.
Yeah. So when the Joneses fenced off the property and the Mayo couldn't come, anymore, so my daddy just did not take this lying down, so he did whatever he had to do. I don't know whatever it was he had to do.
Congressman Collins.
But the mail had to come up to the house.
It was a
They
mail
couldn't, they had to bring the mail up to the house and then turn around and go back, to the official route. To this day, the mailbox is still at that spot, and the mail lady has to come off the mail route, come up to the house and bring the mail. Now, everybody in the area has to put their mailbox down on the main roads, like Old Jones Road and Nimrod Road and whatever road they live on. They have to come down to the main road and roll their boxes up. But we still have, the mail lady to bring the mail up to our door.
It's the
And
last-
that is a result of what my dad did, whatever it was he did,
Congressman Collins.
you know, back during that time.
Was that Leroy Collins?
Yes, Leroy Collins was the
Yes.
congressman at that point in time.
Daddy had a lot of clout by being a religious man, and he was respected in both counties, Hernando as well as Citrus. So Daddy had a lot of voter influence that he never used as a tool, but people respect him as Deacon R.L. Collins from Russell Hill. And Collins found out about that, so he knew Daddy could influence votes. And he would all anything favorable that he could do. And when he get ready to run, he'd come see Daddy and tell him, you know, I'm getting ready to run, blah, 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 and so forth. And so Daddy said, you know, I'll work the best I can for you. And that's one reason that he got that done. So Daddy would say, well, I'll call my congressman. So if anybody challenged him in any way of some rights he's supposed to have, he'd say, well, I'll call my congressman. And they knew Congressman Collins was his congressman. So, you know, he got a lot of respect. He really did. He never, you know, to me, he never tried to push over anybody, but he wasn't going to be pushed over at all my life, all I remember.
He was a good man.
Yeah, a good man.
Oh, very good.
But he would tell you that
He
he
didn't
was
take no
born there and
foolishness.
he would die there. And he meant that.
So now, this farm is still in your family?
Yes.
It's still in the
today?
family.
Awesome.
Mhm.
It's awesome. Have you seen a lot of positive changes in the last few years?
Oh, my heavens, yes.
So many.
Yes, so many, just too numerous.
This is a huge one right
here.
I know when it wasn't a library here. Remember, I was in 5th and 6th grade here when I used to walk from, they call it colored school down on the end of the hill to get, we'd bring a list to get things for the other kids to take back. They want cold drinks, candy bar, cookies, stuff like that. Yes, sure did. Oh my goodness, it was a great life. But it could have been a lot better if I could have gone to school and not had to go through all the changes that I had to go through. But I made it.
You did make it.
Yes.
Let's take a break for just a minute, okay? I want
Yes.
to give you guys a chance to, if you need to use the bathroom, if you would like to have a soft drink or some
No,
water.
I'm actually fine. I thought maybe we were.
If you need to get
Yeah, we
up,
are
just need
about,
to
we
get up and
are,
walk around.
we are just finishing up.
Old guys need to stretch their legs.
Well,
Yeah.
And I'll have some.
Women don't ever have to.
Water.
I think there, let me see, I think there's probably some
If
bottled
not-
water in here.
And if not, I have a bottle of water in my car.
Y'all need to speak a little bit on Mama too, a little bit. Y'all need to speak on Mama, what Mama did.
Just follow me.
Y'all had to speak on her. I'm the one told him about the cow.
Okay, we talk about it.
Cows.
Okay, but you know what you can't think of everything.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah, but we were talking about that and we never did say anything.
say
about
Mama did some beauty shop or something.
Yeah, we did. I didn't really talk about my mother.
Mama was a beautician.
She reminded me that my mother was a beautician, you know, in the area, in Brooksville and in Inverness.
all right, well, let's do that. And let me say this.
Thank you.
If you see them talking about something and you want to chime in, your face won't be on there, but your voice will.
Okay, because I was over here telling him, cows.
Well, you can sit right there on the sofa and just.
Yeah, if you want to sit on the sofa.
Would you like? I don't have any more water, but I have some small cans of like Pepsi next.
Okay, that'd be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, because I know my husband, he'll get caught up and he'll get too long.
And he can just go,
And he'll go and I
go.
have to tell him,
This is wonderful.
switch,
It
switch.
is.
You guys have really got
It's
some.
amazing how there are no accidents. You know, things happen as they are supposed to happen. So a lighter
Providence.
called at a time that she was supposed to call. She called at a time that my brother was here. And, you know, it just made it really great for your project.
Well, we were.
Thank you.
She and I were
Do
here
you
at a
think he
meeting
would
last
want one?
night for our Merchants
Oh, he might.
Association.
Right.
And
I'll just
after
put it over
the
here for
meeting
him.
was over and we're putting the tables and the chairs away, she came over to me and I was back here and she said, talking about the church and, the renovation they've done on Mount Carmel.
That's marvelous
Right.
work that they're doing on that church.
And she was telling me about it and I, trying to see if the Heritage Council was interested in what had happened there. And I said, absolutely. We really would like to have some old pictures and so on and so forth. And then she mentioned you, and she mentioned you as older than she was, and you kind of took care of her to make sure she get to school. and
Right,
that sort of
exactly.
thing. And that's how this all started. It seemed like it was just kind of off the cuff kind of thing.
But it was just meant to be.
It was, and you guys have got great stories. You really do.
I thought you were gonna fall off your chair when he mentioned Chinzigat Hill.
Oh, yeah. There is a young lady, she's in her 50s, but to me she's a young lady. She is in charge of the restoration that's going on there in the Manor House. And I'm sure she'd like to hear about you guys, and I can't do it now.
I haven't been up there in ages. As a matter of fact, the last time I was up there, I was a little girl. Raymond Robbins had a mortgage on the property.
Because my grandfather used to, they used to do business deals together.
So the mortgage I remember,
500.
I don't, was it $500?
$500.
Oh, it might have been $500,
That's a lot.
but he said out of the $500, Mr. Robbins said to my dad, if you bring me $50, that will take care of the mortgage. And I went up there with my dad to give him this $50 to take care of the mortgage that you said he'd borrowed $500.
Yes,
So
yeah.
that was,
See, she'd love to have this story because she's got a lot of stories that other family members from the Robbins era have told. But here's somebody who really didn't live right there.
right.
But you have a connection like that.
Robbins was our
And that is
bank.
really great. It's part of the history.
Robbins was the black folks' bank. Black folks couldn't go to the bank and get borrow no money.
There was a man, a black man, who Robbins put in charge of the property. And the black man traces his history back, like you do with your family, to the slave era. And he is buried in
Lake Lindsay?
Lake Lindsay Cemetery. And of course, back in the day when there was segregation, there was a black area,
Yes.
there was a white area. He's buried in the white area.
In the white area of Lake Lindsay.
Yeah, because I didn't remember it being a black area in Lake
I didn't know that either, but I had heard I knew of a couple of black people who were buried at Lake Lindsay.
Maybe if they were veterans.
No, they were not. I can't remember exactly who they were.
But Robbins thought enough
Yes.
of this man
Uh-huh.
to put him in charge of all of the other workers that were on the farm,
I wonder if this was Harris.
black or white.
That's
was
probably
in-
Harris, Harris. That's probably his last name.
Fiedler Harris.
Yes!
Fiedler.
Fiedler Harris.
Yeah.
We have his picture. That is Fiedler Harris, who
This
was
is
in
my
this
grandfather,
chair.
yeah.
That our grandfather is pictured
Yes.
taking care of him.
Yes.
And I have that picture.
Wow. Well, listen, the next time you guys are here, like if you're coming back next year at this time, or if you're going to be here long enough, I'll let her know who you are and that you're here, and she'd come down and love to have this kind of information. You guys
Well-
are a real treasure. You really are.
But we don't want to impose on you either.
No, I
Okay?
don't mean that.
Because,
Oh, I don't mind, but it's just that we are never here, at the same time. I'm always here, but this is the first time that he has had an opportunity, to be here, at the time that I'm here.
Well, I leave it up to you all. I can give.
Busy. I just heard her name being mentioned. The culture was, as I picked it up from 3 years old, the older people, whoever was the oldest person in the community, had all the correct information. when Daddy would say, somebody would ask Daddy about doing something, he'd say, I don't know, I gotta talk to Grandma Frances. That was the ex-slave, that's Uncle Gillum's wife. So it was really Daddy's grandmother, and he would go to her and confer, and if she gave an okay on it, it was okay. And it was that way even all up until the time she died. I remember when she died. But Daddy wouldn't do anything unless he ran it past Grandma Frances. And Daddy would also run it past my Indian grandmother, which is my mother's mother. But my mother's mother she wasn't very, the word skips me what I want to use, but she was very conservative because she knew that you were poor and you didn't have no money. So if you made any plans to do anything that she couldn't visualize you doing, it was poor. You know, but she was great. She had a lot of integrity and very smart. But on Lizzie, I just heard her name being called because she was the senior person in the community. And that's the way it was looked at. The senior women the women were always leaders. The men never gave them credit for it, but the women always ran everything. And I told my wife, I didn't learn until I was 67 years old that women ran everything and still do. Men think they run things, they don't run nothing. And I was quite shocked when I found out that women runs everything. And they end up getting everything. They inherit everything. I guess the Bible says the meek shall inherit the earth. And it's true. Very true.
So, two things.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned a grandmother who was part Indian.
Mm-hmm.
Was she a part of the Seminoles, or?
She's told me now. Did she tell me Seminole or Blackfoot? I don't know which one she was. I can't pinpoint that down. But she used to tell me she was Indian, and she didn't tell me which one.
But they did that, you know, if they were Indian, it was just Indian,
Indian.
and they never
Yeah.
specified,
Mhm.
you know, what.
What nation you were tied up in, because it was, as I understood, it was the nations of Indians.
Yes, it was.
Mhm.
Now, and Aunt Lizzie, was she involved with Chinsegan?
Yes,
Yes.
she was probably the grandmother. After slavery, she was probably the grandmother, empress. She was a grand empress because everybody knew her, and you didn't do things unless you ran things by the senior person. I noticed it came up through my family, and I imagine it was a lot stronger back in the day. That the oldest man and the oldest woman, regardless, if they had whatever it took, and I don't know what it took, integrity, insight, or whatever, because some people are born with more insight than others, they would instruct you how to go about it. And it came on down from the church, through the church, the same way. Oldest member in the church made decisions, and whatever decision they made, that's what the church did. And I was in my community, that's how it was. And it was very interesting, because age does give you knowledge and wisdom. It might not give you education, but it gives you knowledge and wisdom.
Well, I so much, both Frank and I, so much appreciate the fact that you're willing to come and share your rich
We're just
history.
delighted to
Oh, yes.
have the opportunity to give you the information.
And I hope that we'll continue to share information.
Oh,
because
I
this
intend
is
to
like,
be.
this is like tapping a spring.
Yes.
And, you know,
Mhm. Because I've been speaking to my wife about it, and my wife, you told me about that before. You've already told me that. I say, but I just have to tell it to you again because it's so real, you know. And she doesn't understand, but she'll listen.
well, that's the key, is listening.
Yeah, she'll listen to me. Yeah.
But thank y'all so much.
Oh,
I
you're quite
so
welcome.
appreciate
You're quite welcome.
this.
And I understand that we're gonna get together tomorrow to go to